I think we've got quite a bit to get through tonight, so we best get started as soon as we can. Once again, welcome everybody to tonight's show. It's a little bit different tonight from what we've been doing the last few weeks. Our special guest this evening is John King. I'm sure most of you are familiar with either the name or the person, and I guess if you're not, then settle in, because we have just about an hour's insight from one of the most knowledgeable people in volleyball around at the moment. So, John, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Cara.
No problem at all. Look, it's going to be getting through 40 years almost of volleyball in little under an hour. So I don't think I'm going to ramble on too much here, and nobody came to listen to me. So I'm going to pass straight over to you, John. And I guess maybe what me and I suppose the others are looking for is an insight to your background, and I guess what you did as before you got into volleyball and how you came to go into volleyball, if that's okay, John. Thanks.
Right. Do I talk now? Yeah.
You can talk away.
All right. So I was born in Claremorris, Mayo, and did my national school in Westport, which was a soccer town. So we kicked the ball around up against garage doors and things like that. And the other sports, the local primary school organised, football and hurling leagues, and there was the annual sports day. And there was a local tennis club, and I followed my sister into that and took up the game of tennis. And contrary to what some people might think, I was very forgettable at all sports, but loved them. Secondary school, I went to. We moved to Meath, where I only saw intercounty football, and I moved to Meath and followed the Meath team of the 60s. And So I went to a boarding school then in Finian's Mullingar, and don't recommend boarding schools, but anyway, they had loads of football, and they had one thing which sort of stuck with me is, again, a mediocre first year. I did very badly, but they had seeded leagues. So in second year, the poorer second years are put to the first years. And again, the poorer fourth years are put to the third years. So I had really enjoyable years. And after the first year, they had showers, which meant you could get as mucky. So, I really enjoyed that aspect of football. They had a brilliant team in the middle. They got within 1 point of winning the All-Ireland against St. Jarlath's. But I was never asked to join any panel, which I thought was a correct decision. They were really into handball, and I played loads and loads of handballs and continued playing tennis. So when I went to college, all this sort of thing breaks up. I played a bit of tennis. My wife is a tennis player. But queuing in 1970, the arts block in UCD opened, and queuing for dinner, which took about an hour to get into it, there was a volleyball out in the grass outside. And I saw this strange sport for the first time in my life, and confident people joined in and battered the ball over and back across the net. I daren't ever go near it. So then in 1974, I ended up in Drumshanbo Vocational School in County Leitrim, which obviously I stayed. It was from the very beginning, I fell in love with the place. And it was a very sort of warm and friendly place. But at lunchtime, there was a court between the prefabs and the main building. And there was volleyball on every lunchtime. Now, the school was only 10 years old, so a lot of the staff were under 35. So nearly all the male staff and the fourth year, fifth years, and maybe third year boys played in constant leagues, and they were highly fought. The lunchtime finished at maybe 2 o'clock. I forget what time I finished at, but coming up to 2, every other student gathered around the court and presented to be absolutely interested in the match. So there was full audiences coming up, and it pleaded the headmaster, there's one more point to go, there's one more point to go. So volleyball was absolutely central to the school. I was asked to sort of participate in it, and I said, no way, I'm not making a fool of myself out there. So a year went by anyway, and they coaxed me on, and I fell in love with it. I absolutely went the other extreme. Bought a load of volleyballs in Cleary's, taught my brothers and sisters, or my respective brothers and sisters-in-law, how to play in Baldoyle, where my wife was from, and joined the leagues. And of course, they had a seeding system, so I did okay. The man who brought it to the school was a man called Porrick Noon, and he learned it down in Wexford, where they taught people to be woodwork teachers. And I rang them today and I says to Porrick, well, how did it come there? And he says he doesn't actually, he's not sure. There was a Padre O'Donnell, an inspector, played. He says, but he thinks somebody brought it before his time. And it was passed on from the second years down to the first years when he was there. So the woodwork teachers then brought it to various schools. And I think Eugene Kelly, who ran it for years at Manorhamilton, would have brought it maybe to Manorhamilton. I'm not sure about that now, but Eugene was a woodwork teacher. And so that's the story of it, of my arrival into the school anyway, you know, and seeing volleyball. So that's the that's the background. That's my background in that type of thing.
A lot of sports there. A lot of sports. So you're a big sports person, obviously.
Oh, I love sport. You know, I do, and I love figures as well. You know.
Yeah, well, we get to that because we know that.
So lots of scores and things like that.
Read us there, John, because obviously very few people are able to, you know, give us an insight, I suppose, through decades, maybe even if you can. How volleyball's progressed or changed in school volleyball. Maybe you started mid-70s. I don't know if you can talk about the 70s, maybe that early days. Just work yourself, maybe just if you can briefly enough, up to today's volleyball, if that's okay.
Okay, so these leagues were in the 70s, and at some stage, Porrick was arranging the next league, and I happened to walk in. I was the career guidance, so maybe I was looking for a pupil, and I walked in, and he was arranging the next league, and he had all the kids, the pupils seated, including probably myself. And I said to him, well, if you put the teams if you put the seats this other way, it'll actually turn out easier. And this was sort of maybe the maths in me. And then he says, well, maybe would you like to do it? And I says, I don't mind. And then I began to get involved in actual sort of organizing of the leagues and the seeds. The pupils always, you know, they voted for the players roughly who they thought was best and second best to try and get the teams even. And it worked out quite well. It was so popular then that I actually tried to sort of get games, and I think Sligo VEC had leagues, and we actually went down, would you believe, in the years of before health and safety. As far as I can remember, myself and another woodwork teacher called Tom McGon, we put 6, you know, fourth or fifth year boys in each car along with ourselves and drove to Coola and Ballymote vocational schools, and we won both matches anyway and came back safe. I think the sump of the car might have got damaged, maybe, or nearly anyway, when we went over bumps and things like that. But those are the good old days when you could lump anybody in the car. And I contacted, I don't know how I found them. I contacted the Volleyball Association, and I was invited to the AGM in 1977. It was in a hotel in Dublin, and they said the nearest place is Edenderry. So I says, oh God, no, it's too far away. And so that ended national contact for, you know, 12 years or something like that. It turns out that Offaly was very strong at the time, and locally, community games, the top parish in County Roscommon, which sends most of their kids to Drumshanbo, is Kilronan. It's where Rigna Mines are. And they organised teams there. There was a man called Mr. McManus. He had children on the teams, and they entered the community games and got to Mosney and got gold and silver. And I know, he said, Offaly was one of our big problems, and I think there was strong teams in Waterford's way back then as well. So suddenly I noticed then these third years were beating the Leaving Certs, and of course it was some of these kids that in fact their standard had gone way up. And they also turned out to be brilliant at Gaelic football. I mean, our best Gaelic football team ever. We got to, you know, nearly the best in Connacht in a vocational school back in those days. But the leagues went on, and then suddenly in the mid-80s, I discovered that there existed in North Leitrim, in Manorhamilton Comprehensive, a Northwest Volleyball Blitz. So in its 4th year, we got into it, and we were doing quite well, and we met Summerhill College in the final. Big school in Sligo town, and we're doing fine. And then Summerhill College said, you're following the ball, which was true by national standards. And then they just beat us, you know, relatively easy. And another thing though, there was this guy who was hitting the ball down the whole time, and he always seemed to be in the same position. And it was about, 6 years later, I discovered what they were doing. How could a guy be in the same position the whole time? But obviously they were quite advanced. And it turns out they actually took over community games, Sligo parishes, from the Kilronan parishes in the community games.
It's interesting. You mentioned these awfully, and you mentioned Sligo to me, but we don't have schools there at the moment. Where I suppose we've got dips, we've seen growth spurts in other counties, I guess.
Yeah. Mercy Sligo was strong. Well, they had girls as well as boys. Most of ours had been boys, but they had girls as well as boys. So the girls started mixing with the boys. They would have always done volleyball and PE, the girls, but they didn't have separate leagues. But they started playing mixed in the leagues, and so we entered girls' teams as well. We had a teacher called Michael McGuinness. He was on the Leitrim team of the century. Sadly, he's passed away at a young age, but so he played intercounty for years for Leitrim, but he was a fabulous volleyball player on these leagues. And he took the girls, for a few years in Manorhamilton, and there he was, a big row one year because they were pulled for touch and things like that. But,
you mentioned the girls there. I was having to look back the results, and I think between 1976 and 1986 was the senior A girls was a proper battle between Thurles and Mercy Tuam, back and forth for every year it seemed to be they were meeting each other in the final. But for about that decade, I think between the mid 70s and mid 80s, it was really those two schools battling it out. And
yeah, I found old stuff from 1977, and I saw Sister Cabrini, who was the main coach in Presentation Thurles, was involved at that stage. And of course, when I saw the records years later, she was very dominant. As Tanya, I rang her once to sort of get her back, get more from her, but she said she'd given all her facts about Presentation Thurles to a girl who was doing it for a project, and it was lost. I meant to get back to her again, but last I heard, she was living in Waterford, in a convent in Waterford. The Tuam, what happened, the Manorhamilton, we won the competition 3 times. And then, in fact, the last 2 finals we played in, we got beaten by Marymount, Carrick and Shannon. And then next year we beat the vocational school in Carrick and Shannon. So other Leitrim schools were playing at that stage as well. But then P.J. Cleary, the organizer in Manorhamilton, said he was stopping the competition. And around the same time, 87, we started getting letters from the national organization. I think they sent them to every school in the country. And mentioning Tuam and that, every 5 years, the different counties in Connacht host the community games. So in 1988, the secretary in Drumshanbo said, "John, could you ever take community games teams for us?" Now, another teacher had Drumshanbo in community games, in the early 80s, but this is my first involvement in community games. And on the girls' team, they weren't all from our school, and one of them had gone to boarding school in Mercy Tuam, which was Mary Hughes was in charge in Mercy Tuam, and they were very dominant. And I said to the girl, I says, "Well, do you do anything besides hit the ball over and back and things like that?" And she showed me this idea of a setter. I'd never heard of a setter. So we've been playing. Now, some kids always set the ball up for the bigger, taller ones, but we didn't know that such a concept existed. And when we went back to the final Northwest Bliss, I had setters, and sure, we destroyed every team because we now were more organized,
Okay, so the 90s was a period of dominance for Drumshanbo, I hope.
Oh yeah, we went into competition. The community games ended. We met Loughrea for the first time ever, and Sister Bosco, who maybe some of the older people would know. Oh my God, she just roared and shouted at them. And this is when they were winning, 14-0. And it was just terrifying. Their girls were out of this world. And so we, just at the time we entered in 1989, we had boys around under 50, and they were mad into volleyball. They used to roll up a big ball of paper and play it and divide, put chairs up in the desk when there was no teacher there, and play volleyball in class and things like that. They were mad into it. We thought we'd do very well. And we met Loughrea, and they annihilated us. And we went back the next year, and they annihilated us. And then we met a team from Lisbon, Varna. And the first thing we noticed with them is they spent about 20 minutes warming up. We had never seen warm up in our lives, So we were still learning. And I said to the headmaster, "What's the point? It's €100 for a bus or £100. This is, why we just go back to our old ways." And he says, "No, do it again." And 2 things happened. the Volleyball Association, unusually, was a bit disorganized, and a January competition didn't take place till May, so we kept on training. And Donald Coughlin, who was in charge that year, Donald was the manager of Presentation Clonmel, who finally seemed to be able to beat both Tuam and Loughrea. Said, you're stuck in with the best teams in Ireland in Lisdoonvarna and Galway. We're going to put you into Dublin. And we took off. But all the training, and this happened to be a special crew, and next thing, they just won everything for 4 years. And in the middle, we went to Europe. And when we qualified for Europe, they sent us down John Clark, who, they have some people nationally, and this was just unbelievable. This man knew all about volleyball, and he was down in Carrick-on-Shannon training us, and that was very exciting. And we didn't do too bad in Europe. I had a teacher, Tricia Hardigan, with me, and she had French, and she was great help. And I got sick, but anyway, we won a few sets. We didn't disgrace ourselves,
Good.
So
went up to the, I suppose, the early 2000s. Then I suppose the last 20 years in Drumshanbo. Then I suppose by now you've really got a handle on volleyball. And
yeah.
You mentioned Loughrea there, and I know from talking to Mary, she used to be tired of bringing her teams up to get a beating off you for a long time.
Yeah. I suppose what happened is that after the big team left, I said, well, could we do it with other players, and so we kept at it, and we had a very big success, and we were sort of nearly I'd say I got arrogant myself, and I met Mary first time. She was at the athletics over in Europe, Mary Barrett, and she sort of was saying, oh, that's a nice sport, I might start doing that sport. And I says, all right. And of course, the first time Mary was learning, and I remember she got to a C girls, and I said, oh, that's great, she's doing well. And we used to beat them a lot, all right. And then I got too cocky and thought, and then suddenly they beat us once or twice in the shock. And then, of course, from the mid-noughties to the early 10s, I mean, Mary was in 10 consecutive senior finals. I think she didn't get tired coming up to us, because she barely beat us most places, no matter where we played it, And I think we went down to Loughrea more than she came up to Drumshanbo, It was a huge problem with us, the distance we had to travel, because, Loughrea is in the Midlands. It's handy for them,
Yeah, I think traveling is a big thing in the volleyball world, because, we just don't have the numbers of schools at the moment. So, yeah, I think until we grow, we're going to have to keep pushing on with that, I guess. But like in today's volleyball, Drumshanbo, this leads me kind of on to the next project. I want to talk about the North versus South Cup. But just briefly, I'll mention that was held in the indoor arena this year. We really wanted to elevate that project or that program, because we really felt it deserved, the status. And your under-16s won it. They won the under-16 North versus South All-Ireland, beating Campbell College very tight in a 2-1. And your senior team just missed out, lost an incredible 5-setter in Dublin in December to, I suppose, have the opportunity to do the double. But just on that competition, am I right in saying you had a hand in this setting up of that? Is that fair?
Yeah, just before we sort of slipped through the noughties there. I mean, I retired from Drumshanbo in 2015, and unbelievably, those people like Aidan Shannon and Sean Scollin and Shane Hegarty took it over, so I have only been an assistant, for the last 5 years, and it's been the most wonderful 5 years, because I'm not in charge. It's absolutely wonderful. I don't have to I just come along to the training and that. So yeah, I did. We had after 11 years, we finally won the senior again in 2003-04. And by now the internet was a big thing, and I waste my time, like a lot of people, surfing around the place. And next thing I discovered, not only was there a Northern Ireland Volleyball Association, but they had schools competitions with winners. So I scanned it and found an email and sent off an email and said, what about playing us? And I don't know whether it was Paul McElwain. Paul has done most of the work for the North since every year. But yeah, the boys went up to Craigavon, and they would be not of the Republican persuasion up there now. So I had to sort of watch to make sure my players were sort of, not shouting the wrong slogans as we talk. But they've had a great welcome us. We've mostly played them in County Fermanagh, in either Enniskillen or Lisnaskea a lot. The girls then, I contacted the girls teams, and particularly when Naas became strong again in the noughties, they often, used to contact each other separately each year. But it was nice. I'd ring a new school that won one and they'd be surprised. Oh my God, we can play in this competition. That's until this year when you took it over completely.
Yeah, like I said, we were trying to, I suppose, build that up to the standard, because we feel it's just such a crucial event in the school calendar, and we really wanted to sort of promote it and build it as much as we can. I think the South took 3 out of the 4 this year, but it was 2-2 the year before, so it's pretty close going.
Yeah, it does vary. Yeah, the Northern boys would be of the 4 age groups. The Northern boys would dominate. I'd say, they've won more than the South at senior, but they have a straight 6 years, and some schools like ours don't have transition years, so we wouldn't be as old as them. But the cadet final, which we won this year, himself and Shane Hegarty, it must be the longest cadet match. I think it was an hour and a half. I don't think it ever, for a 3-setter, I don't think it ever go across a match that went on forever, and it was so close.
Yeah.
And as you say, the senior final was a fabulous match. We lost, but it was against Flannans and Ennis. It was a fabulous match. It was just really,
that was an incredible match of volleyball. Really,
yeah, it was, yeah.
And look, I tell you this then, when you're talking about incredible matches and stuff, do you have, and I mean, you span through a lot of decades there, do you have a favorite moment in volleyball? I know that's a tough one, but
I don't know.
That's the honest answer.
Yeah, I was just thinking about volleyball. I mean, volleyball can be so enjoyable. I'd often, Sean Scollin in school used to go down with me and the B's and C's down in the hall. And sometimes we'd laugh our way through the whole lot and they would just enjoy themselves. And all they do is play games, and, if you get a joy in people, it's hard to beat that. And that would be always my first aim. But I mean, I have a load of high moments. Our first big standard match against Portmore, Mike Hanway and Kieran Sullivan back in '91. I couldn't believe, oh my God, this is a brilliant match, and we nearly won it. And when we won our first All-Ireland semi-final against Lisdoonvarna, when we won our first final, they had bonfires. It was pouring rain. We had to get out the pouring and walk into town, and there was a big crowd. Afterwards, what I found out was that it was around 11:30 in the dark at night, and all the pubs, there was a band. The headmaster, Porrick McLaughlin, he was a great sport. He hired the youth band. We walked into town, and with all the noise, all the people come out of the pubs, and there was a great crowd there, They really enjoyed. So there was great moments. And then when we got through to Mosney, that was very exciting. And the girls winning in Mosney, I mean, that was just unbelievable. And that was a Patricia Gilroy and Shambo brought them there. That was just fabulous. And then we won a second junior Ray, a lady called Etna Coyne, who did the juniors for years. She was there, and I wasn't there at all myself, but even on video, youngsters are more excited when they're second years and things like that. That was a great one. And as I said, winning a senior A after 11 years, that was brilliant after losing a goal in finals. And my youngest son played in the fall. After 2 wins, we were in the final, and he came on as a sub because he was a bit injured. And I had an eye operation, so I wasn't allowed to be the coach. Aidan Keown took them over. And I really enjoyed that match because I was a spectator. So even though we lost, it was the most enjoyable match of my life because I could cheer for Drumshanbo and I couldn't do anything. I had to keep well away from the court with my eye, So there's been lots of ones. And then some of the matches that have been brilliant since Aidan Shannon took over to the last few years. 2 years ago, winning the cadet, we were not favourites, and that it was most of this team that were in the senior final, and that was just to win when you're not expected is the brilliant thing of all. But
I'll sort of flip the question a little bit. Over the years, then, is there a toughest opponent that you've ever faced, or is there a team that stands out to you that you just sat back and thought, wow, what do I do against that team? Or maybe a tough opponent over the years?
It's funny, you know, more look back on the ones where you had very tight matches with, like Mary Barrett dominated, for 10 years. But when she was dominating, she beat us well. And we were dominating, we didn't have very many really tight matches, the Sister Bosco, and they had Cyril Farrell, who trained the Galway to 3 senior hurling titles. He was in charge of their seniors, and it was a fabulous team there. We just, when I won our first seniors, it was just an outstanding match. John Sims had a great Lisdoonvarna team in the mid-90s. Mike Henry and Kieran Sullivan had 2 great teams at Portmarnock, and we had 5 setters against them as well as Lisdoonvarna. Naas CBS, that came from the same Naas club that produces all these girls, had a fabulous cadet team in the early noughties. And then Pádraig Noon's son went to our school, learned his volleyball, and started in Elphin. And in the mid-noughties, he had this fabulous team. One of the players was just, he could hit from anywhere, Fintan Craig, and he went on to play for Roscommon. Maybe I think he's still playing with them. And Paul's school is so tiny, but I was delighted, that that past pupil was leading another school. And of course, that Elphin school produced Aidan Shannon, who now is our coach. Jennifer Quinn then came in, and there was a great Rayfield's team in the early part of this decade. But I suppose the single match was Tom Lander said he wasn't that much involved. I think you've had Tom Mambers on this series of programs. He said he wasn't that involved, but they used to shoot the ball across there. It was a Mount Mellick team around 2001, and we had a 5-setter and lost 18-16 in the 5th set. And it was just an outrageously good match. And that was singularly just an outstanding match of all. And Emer Hannafy was there in Mount Mellick for a year, and Emer was an absolute lady, and begrudgingly I said, well, now it's your turn, so all those great teams. And of course the Flannans team at the moment is a brilliant team as well.
You have some memory for all these games. Like, I can fairly remember who won last year's Senior A.
Well, I can tell you who won all of them.
Well, I suppose then, tell me this, John. Over the last 20 and 30 years, I mean, what are the biggest changes you see in volleyball, as well as schools volleyball?
Yeah, well, I suppose the rule changes that they made around 2000 were brilliant. They allow a double touch. Before that, when the ball was served over the net, you had to dig it in. And when new schools joined, if we were playing a new school with our B team, we knew we'd win because they couldn't dig the ball. So once that came in, that you could have 2 touches, new schools had a chance of dragging that ball up and getting it into play. And it improved an awful lot the hope for new schools that they could survive, whereas there was awful trashings under the old system where a new school had to dig the first ball. Libero was brilliant for small players in our school and lots of schools, and it also helped. I remember we had a fellow who played the old system, and the Libero came in, and a fellow called Owen Keefe, and he died young, unfortunately, but he was big and he loved blocking, and he hated the backcourt. And when the Libero came in, he thought it was the most brilliant invention. Thanks be to God, I can go off for the backcourt. I hate the backcourt, So the other one was the score change. You only scored if you served. And there'd be these matches back in the 90s, and it would be, low-level match, and the 2 teams wouldn't be very good, and they couldn't serve. So you'd be 5 minutes, and it'd be 6-all, and nobody net. They were just desperate. Oh, for God's sake, So the fact that now it's a score, and I was at the Special Olympics. I was sort of helping out there, and obviously some of the teams were not, top-class international volleyballers of full ability, and to an end. So they were great changes, and they're the biggest things, that new schools don't get hammered as they used to, So
it's extremely important. I mean,
yeah. I hate one-sided matches.
Okay, so I mean, you give me a few positive things there. So we're going to ask the tough questions. What would you change in schools volleyball? What is it that niggles you now, and you think, okay?
Yeah, and I know. Well, here I don't know if there's any sort of coaches. because I was retired, I went along with Brita Travis, our girls teacher, 2 or 3 years ago, and they had a first-year blitz in Strokestown, I mean, in Roscommon. And for that year, they were played on badminton courts, but I think it might have been 4-a-side or 6, I forget, but you had to play 3 touches. And in the beginning of the blitz, they found it difficult enough, but by the end of the drill, the 3 touches were going great. And it was the best girls volleyball at that low level I'd seen for a long time. Now, for some reason, I think that's gone again. I think that's a terrible mistake. I see loads of Cadet C girls and even Senior C, the ball is served straight back, straight over, and you get the 2 best players playing a game of solo. So I think, like in junior volleyball, you can't head the ball, you can't kick the ball. I think, particularly in C girls and that at the young level, it should be strictly 3 touches. Or something to that effect. They get used to it and they can play it, to me, what I hate this ball going straight over and straight back. I take players off if they do that. I say you're too selfish, but I think I was so delighted to see that, but I think they changed the rule again. Now, the girls have played far away since, so I haven't seen them, but I think they dropped that rule again.
Was the rule at a junior level then, just to encourage it?
That was a first-year level now. It was for first years. And, Drumshanbo had 3 teams on the day, and there might have been 3 teams from Strokestown, 3 teams from Elphin. And I don't know if it went on to All-Ireland medal, but I thought it was brilliant. And you could see as the day went on, they got used to the fact they couldn't send it straight back, and they passed it, and they got better and better as the day went on. And now some of those girls are better at passing now because they're, cadets and seniors, that they play a better type of game. But I would love to see that compulsory. Boys tend to pass more,
I've heard of it from a few different coaches. They like, the 3-touch compulsory.
Oh, I definitely think, and it just means, if you don't, kids are standing there getting cold, because why would you pass it to that one if you don't have it? She's useless. I'm not going to pass to her. This is the mentality. I don't trust anybody else. I'm the only one that can play volleyball. Yeah, and yeah. Thanks very much, but I'm not coming back the next day. Say these other girls, they'll quit.
I think there's definitely something in what you're saying there about, by the end of the day, especially with the more games, we do it at the 4v4 where it's a full day blitz. And there's a phenomenal change in the first game and the last game.
Yeah.
And like you say, by just making them do these things, they will get there. They will get there.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Well then, we've talked about a rule change there. So what about sport in general, John? We have a lot of issues around COVID at the minute, and whether we're going to be back with schools, and nobody really knows what we're doing at the moment. But just as a general question, where do you see sport heading in the next few years? Is it plateaued? Is it got a bit, are people going for single sports, double sports? Where do you see the game going?
Well, there's no problem playing volleyball. I suppose the only problem with volleyball is indoors, whereas they definitely say that COVID is less dangerous outdoors, that an awful lot of volleyball is played indoors, even though all our volleyball in Drumshanbo until we got to national level was all outdoors. We didn't have an indoor hall or anything like that. So it was all outdoors on tarmac, Didn't have much diving, all right. That was the fun thing,
No pancakes.
But people used to serve underhand up deliberately high so it would go into the sun in your eyes of the other player. They were very good at, using, and the wind, oh my God, just have the wind. But should they got better then because of that? They were used to play with this gale. I said, don't hit it easy, it'll go way out the far side. But sport, we'd have training, and I'd call into the schools some evenings in the last year or two, and the Brita, the PE teacher, would have sport, and she's had problems, and I've heard it in other schools that some kids they don't want to play sport. I don't like sport, and that's it. And I have a note here from my mammy. I have a sore foot. I have pain in my ear. I'm allergic to balls and all sorts of things. So I went in, and they were doing sort of, dance music and dancing museums and all sorts of things like that. Different things seem to have come into the PE. And I think that's very good because, everybody needs to move. And, if it's the music, why not? So I think sport and exercise, the cycling and all this now, the bicycle shops, my local bicycle shops, come back in about a month and I might fix your bike. It's brilliant what's happened that way. So COVID has got people athletic, but as regards say this coming year in volleyball, I'd say the buses are the problem. Traveling, you know, like you can, it's a non-contact, but you have to stick them into a little bus, and oh my God, they're on top of each other on these mini buses, you know, and you're going to Loughrea, oh my God, or Limerick, you know, all day on the bus. So when will that come back? Mind you, this. When is the government going to bring masks in for public transport? They're crazy not to bring it in. But anyway, you know, every other country in the world has nearly got one.
We get back to sports. Let's talk about you on the side of the court now, because obviously you still attend games. But even as a coach and now as assistant coach, you're very famous and recognized as a stats person. You'll always be seen at the side of the court in your notebook, head down, jumping down, nonstop, running out of pens by the end of a game. Can you talk us through what happens or what you're doing during a match? Because obviously there's a lot of writing going on, and I think people are interested to see what you're writing or what your insight on what you're thinking is that.
Yeah, you know, I have a load of stats and all sorts of things written on my pad. And Mary Barrett has won the match, and she has no notes, you know, like, so, oh Lord. Yeah, I started off, I suppose, just checking the scores, and you know, just writing everybody's, you know, scores down. And I'm a big one for how, you know, if can you hit 2 or 3 or 4 serves in a row. And in fact, you know, from very early on, we had a school record. That very good team in the early 90s, there was one fella hit 33 serves in a row between semi-final and final, didn't miss one. And in the great girls team in the late 90s, there was a girl who did 33 in a row. And then in the mid-noughties, 2 boys on the same team both hit 50 serves in a row without missing. They were fabulous. And so you get sort of, you know, these are things, you know, I just, you know, and I would sort of tell them, you know, well done. And we didn't even win with those 2 Kitchener beat us, but you know, Kitchener, lovely people there, Mary Flanagan and those, would be good to them. But so you'd be watching the rotation and that, and say, you know, checking them, and then checking the scorekeepers. Scorekeepers are notorious for mistakes, and I miss them sometimes myself. I see in the video afterwards, oh my God, they've the score wrong. They've put us back instead of forward. Oh, the amount of mistakes in scorekeepers. But I with all my notes, I missed them, you know. But so for semi-finals and finals now, big matches where I would be switching players, down the side I'd have all the various rotations, so that I'd be watching now, where are they, who, you know, because they'd be moving so fast. Now, who is supposed to be serving next, and that I'd be checking that. So I'd have the players opposite, so I'd say, oh, it's this one rotation around that. And then when the referee calls rotation error, you know, I can say, is he right or is he wrong? And you know, sometimes it does help, and I says, no, I'll fight it. You know, they definitely were in the right rotation. Sometimes, of course, I found the other, oh shit, they're all wrong. You know, they're, oh my God, you know, how are we going to get out of this? You know, the referee's going to see it sometime. I don't put up my hand and say, referee, we're wrong. I would in an early match, you know, where all the other coaches are understandable, you know. Junior A can be, or junior can be chaotic. Everybody's in the wrong position. But
are you identifying their weaknesses or your strengths?
Oh yeah, I would take notes then for timeout, and particularly nowadays, you know, Aidan or Shane Hegarty would, you know, we might agree on the timeout or whatever, but they'd call it, they'd talk to them. And then I might just go up to an individual player, you know, that point you made there, you should have been standing there, you're in too far, or you should have been back covering that thing. They're always going to send them down there, and I'd have notes written. But I mean, I miss an awful lot, you know. I mean, you know, you do fine when you win, and when you lose, you know, why didn't I take more notes on that? But at the All-Ireland final, that really brilliant match, the senior one, there was a player, a smart guy, and I asked him, would he take the stats beside me to free me up? And it didn't work out at all. I felt lost without my biro and pen, and he did great stuff beside me, but it just, you know, I had a terrible match all around. I was recovering from an operation as well, and wasn't in it. Daniel Curran was his name, but and he did an absolutely brilliant job, but I wasn't ready for how good he was.
Okay.
So I felt lost without my sort of crutch, you know. But so anyway, yeah, that's the sort of thing I would have at the side, you know. But and then all those, you know, the local paper. I brought it down to show it here. Oh, where's it gone here? I had it just to give it. Anyway, the Leitrim Observer has been brilliant, you know, so all the serves go into the paper and things like that. They've given us tremendous coverage down the years, and the Roscommon Herald, some of our players, Roscommon, and if there's a lot of Roscommon players, they give us loads of coverage as well, you know. So all those stuff that's used for reports on that, particularly if there's no video on that, you know.
Yeah,
So,
you're on the radio quite a bit as well. You're not on the radio as well quite a bit.
Sorry.
You're on the radio quite a bit as well.
Oh yeah, Shannon side is quite good. I mean, well, Aidan now would maybe do it more than me, but Aidan, you know, is an All-Ireland. I don't know if people know, concert flute player. So you know, he's well used to the media. He's been on television and all that, and you know, he's a celebrity before he ever came to volleyball. You know, so he's very relaxed on radio. So he does most of that now.
I'm just gonna do a few shout outs because Aidan's come on to the YouTube channel there, and guys, you can come and say hello if you want. He's give you a little go, John, a few exclamation marks, thumbs up. Do you know a Sharon McGorty? Is it?
Oh, a lady. I love Sharon.
She says, I don't imagine John ever just tags along. I don't think so either. The relationship that him and Aidan Shannon built with those lads is astonishing. John is the volleyball equivalent of a memory man. And then Diarmaid McKiernan is on as well to say John is a legend, and I think that's pretty much how the volleyball world would recognize you, John, to be fair.
Oh no.
Well, I get, just before we do kind of come to an end of the session, because I don't want to keep you too long, we're coming on to nearly 45 minutes. What kind of qualities make a great volleyball player, just in your own opinion, your own mind? What do you look for, or what, when a volleyball player turns up to you with a full package, what is that? What does that look like to you?
Well, you know, I think it's different for every volleyball coach. When I go down, you know, to a hall with a bunch of fellas, you know, if the people are, if they're friendly, you know, if they've good humor and things like that, because if they're sort of smiling back and happy, it gets me going. If they're there and all glum and kicking the ball and doing that, I want to go home. So sort of a positive attitude. And I suppose it's very good if they ask questions, you know, because, you know, it's very complicated. And if they give you feedback and things like that, you know, you get the exceptional ones that, you know, that can read the opposition. Now they're gold dust. I'm not great at reading the opposition. A player that will realize that the player beside them mightn't be as good and supports them and builds them up. On that cadet team now, they've tremendous, you know, it's one of their qualities, that team that played that marathon in Blanchardstown against Campbell College. They've tremendous support to each other. You know, I nearly noticed it more in the video afterwards, how much they talk to each other and calmed in that tense match that they kept on. A determination not to give up, you know, to just keep going, and it's just amazing. There was a fella years ago, and he had a load of friends, and he came along to volleyball, and he was very tall and gangly, you know, the overgrown first year. And we used to play the courts. If the ball came here, it could go into the next field. It could go anywhere. He was just so, you know, about 10, like an octopus, too many hands and things. But he kept coming for 5 years. And in his leaving search here, he was joined by a sort of a good footballer, a very good footballer, confident fella, and thought this guy was a bit of an idiot until the ball was set for him. And from such a gangly fella with playing volleyball for 5 years, he could run, take the steps, jump in the air and smash down. And this footballer, just his mouth opened that this guy could do that, you know, and that was just from coming, you know, and it was his friends. He went along with his friends. So a determination, you know, it's amazing, you know, what they can produce if they keep on trying. You will improve, you know. And another thing, of course, is if they give you quiet feedback. You know, the fella that says, this is rubbish what we're doing here, I can do without that. But if the guy says, look, I think we're at this drill too long, that's brilliant, you know, and things like that, you know. So there are some of the things anyway.
Yeah, okay. Now, that would make a good team anyway, if you had them. I want to sort of bring up something that you're doing, a little side project you're doing yourself. And maybe you can talk a bit more about it, but just Drumshanbo is almost 50 years in volleyball. Is that correct?
That's right, this year, yeah.
You're doing a book or something? Maybe you want to just...
you know, I might get it done if, you know, it's a very dangerous thing if the coronavirus goes on and on and on. You know, but I don't think I'll ever get it done, but I'll start. It'll probably be an ebook, and then maybe I'd put it up on the internet or something like that. But it's, as you can see, it's just massive. I mean, it's just so much. So I will ring Pádraig Noon eventually. I told him I'll be back to him and says I got to get you to find out who were the good players from 1970 to 1975 before it came, so I want to get all things in it and mention, lots and lots of players. So it's a massive task. Who knows, I might or might not get it done, but it's something, it's a challenge.
Well, we hope you certainly do. I'll just go back to, because there's a few more comments coming in. Mary's joined us. John's a brilliant presentation and really enjoyable evening, and I really enjoyed all our battles. And I hope we have many, many more.
Oh God, no
I'm
more.
sure you guys will. As many of your senior team, John, are they left, the ones that lost the final this year?
Yeah, we don't know. We sort of have, there's a sort of a different system in Drumshanbo, and that we never know. Certainly, it would be very unlikely Garrett will be back now. Garrett Kilmartin, who is captain of the Irish under-18s or 19s.
Phenomenal, yeah. I give him so many MVPs through his career. It's just like take it.
Garrett's uncle Kevin McPartin was on the brilliant team of the early 90s, a fabulous volleyballer as well. Colin McGorty, he captained the cadet team last year. He's unlikely to be back, and Peter Winters, who's been setting for years. They definitely won't be back. The others, it's never that clear, just because we have a different system in Drumshanbo than most schools. We wouldn't be sure.
Okay, keeps it exciting though. I'm sure you'll be there or thereabouts next year anyway. You always are.
Well, hopefully there's this volleyball, I suppose, to begin with anyway.
A lot of people praising you, obviously, from the thing, but there's one coming in from Aidan, and he puts down all your success. Behind every good man's a good woman. Hilda.
Of course. I mean, the biggest surprise I got was that I played tennis with Hilda, and she was definitely for a female, she was able to match me, even though male is supposed to be stronger and that. And it never occurred to me that that when we had children, that they might get her genes, and so she's been there. I mean, she sort of at times knows that I do too much volleyball and I can't be talked at, and it's mid-season, and then it comes towards the end of the season. Aren't you finished now? Isn't that it for this year? But she's been very supportive, and of course she sort of got me set up. What about backdrops and things? This is a bit invisible, but these are sort of rare things here. This came from you said you might be able to read it, but it's the Cadet A Team 2010-11. So anyway, it's a lovely piece, and this came from the cadet team. You probably won't read this. Cadet Boys Volleyball Team 2016 and 17. Some of the recent senior team were on that second one. Now, the second one, they also gave something to Aidan, who was the manager. Both of those teams lost their final, and that was just mind-blowing. And we were that first one I was absolutely disappointed. Mary's team just beat us well, and I really had great hopes for them. And but we beat that fabulous Rayfields team of the early 10s in the semi-final. So I just couldn't believe it that they came up and and this more recent team. I mean, that's wow, a losing team after losing in All Ireland to come up and present you with those things, So those are special moments. Yeah.
Well, look, I think that's an incredible way to wrap up, John. I want to thank you, obviously, for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. And a great insight to, the 70s, the 80s, the differences in volleyball. There's no better person really to tell us all about that. So, I mean, we might even, revisit this someday, because we're getting plenty of positive feedback here on the chat, just saying what a great guy you are, and people love to hear you chat. So
Yeah.
maybe hopefully we can do it again.
Just one thing, about fouling the ball, and if you don't think it's a foul, which was back there. In the early 90s, I played in my last league, and at this stage the boys were playing national, and in the middle of the league, a player on the opposing side, "You're fouling the ball," said it to me, which of course I had done all my life. And I says, "I think it's time for me to retire. I have trained these guys to play proper volleyball. I can't do it." So with that, I said, "That's my last league," and I retired, So they pushed me out in the end, rightfully so. I wasn't able to play to the proper standard.
I'll finish here with a few, because there's a few more quotes or a few more things coming through, and I don't want to leave anybody out because they've taken the time to write here. Sean Flood, what a great name. Flood, my own name. Super.
There's a Connor Flood as well.
There is a Connor Flood, I know. Every time I see his name.
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know, my name's Connor Flood. And well done, John. Great history of Drumshanbo Vocational School Volleyball. Paul Noon's on. Hi, Paul. How are you? I enjoyed your interview. It's great to recap on your many years of volleyball. And Dermot McKiernan, savage stuff, John. Miss hearing all these chats, and I'm excited face. That'll give you a little flavor of,
Sean Flood now is an interesting one, because if it's the same Sean Flood, Sean would have played volleyball, around the early 1980s, and he was on that very good football team that I was talking about in the early 1980s. So it's nice to hear, somebody coming in. Now if it's the same Sean Flood, he's an uncle of the Connor Flood that's on that cadet team,
John, listen, I'll wrap it up. We're coming on to 5 to 9. I don't want to keep you all night. Everyone else at home, I hope you've really enjoyed this evening. I certainly have. It's been, something different and just nice, relaxing way to spend an hour, and just taking a nostalgic trip down memory lane. And look, we'll hopefully try and do this again. John, thanks again, and best of luck. And we'll see you at the final, hopefully in December.
Well, hopefully there's totally new teams. We want, new blood. Thanks very much, Connor. And it's always, it's a pleasure working with you, and you're a great addition to Schools Volleyball.
Thanks, John. Thank you. John, all the best. Have a great evening. Thank you, everybody at home.
Bye-bye.
Good night. God bless. Thanks. Bye.